What did he find? What did he find? Oh my gosh, it's a thrifty find.
Woo! Time for another episode of Tom's Thrifty Finds. Today, we're talking Thomas Edison Cylinder Records. I found these at an antique store for $2 a pop. Yeah, I got two of them. Woo! Look at these. These things are ancient. I believe these are dated from 1900s. And when I first saw them, I was like, whoa, these can't only be $4. I've never seen these in person. I've heard of them. Never seen them. Heard, but never seen. Check it out. You're all familiar with records, right? But are you familiar with cylinder records? We have two different types here. One of them is a gold molded. And the other, I believe, is probably a little older, because the gold molded came later. And they're both different in their own ways. You can see how this one has a flat top and this one has kind of like a little slanted. This one also has a different bottom here. I'm not sure if a piece broke off, but it almost, you can see like a little piece of paper in there. So that's interesting. That's my actual first time noticing that. Huh. Yeah. But yeah, my first thought was like, hey, why are these so cheap? And I think it's just because these are later on in the manufacturing where they started to be mass produced. And so these are kind of all over the place. I've looked them up on the internet. They're selling pretty cheaply. Unless you have like the original old ones, then it's kind of worth a little bit more. There's also something I noticed, that the case itself has a felt inside to help protect it. Because that's the one thing about these, they're really sensitive. So if they get any scrapes or nicks on them, they're pretty much not usable and the sound will be terrible. And that might also be a reason why they're so cheap, because they're hard to maintain. Also, these are clearly made for different phonographs. And that's important too, because if you put them on a wrong phonograph, I mean, you can mess it up. You put a wrong needle on them, you can mess them up. So very delicate things. So, whoops. See how this one has very more smooth inside. This one's got grooves. Just like a little piece of history. And I thought I'd talk about the history of them here. So like I was saying before, these ones are a little more common. The rare ones are typically brown, pink, green, even orange, and those ones can be worth hundreds of dollars. Now the phonographs are another story. Those are a pretty penny. Those can go anywhere from up to $1,000. So let's get into it. The idea for the phonograph came into fruition in 1877. Thomas Edison was working on improvements to the telegraph and telephone, and he was experimenting with these little diaphragms that are attached to an embossing pen, and he noticed subtle vibrations and indentations were being made on paraffin wax paper. So he replaced the wax paper with a metal cylinder wrapped in tin foil. So imagine one of these but metal, and then it had like this really this tin foil over it. Typically, you would just speak into a little mouthpiece. You put your mouth right up to him and go, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm pretty sure you had to talk fairly loud. And then your little vibrations of your vocals would go into the needle, and then little vibrations would sound off on these, and you make little etch marks. Should we get a little close look there? You can kind of see them on there. So after some experimenting, Edison drew up a sketch of the device and had it built by his mechanic, John Crucy, which apparently he did in only 30 hours. Once created, Edison tested out the machine as soon as possible. He couldn't wait to get his hands on that bad boy and test it out. He did this by reciting the nursing rhyme, Mary Had a Little Lamb. So he just put his mouth up to the phone, the little speaker. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb. And guess what? It worked. He was able to play back the cylinder and hear his own voice. Woo! Edison's mind was blown, as you can see from this photo. So the original device he experimented on looked like this. Apparently the novelty of the tinfoil device wore off quickly with the public, And Edison then put his focus on the incandescent light bulb instead. He wanted to get that light bulb going, you know what I'm saying? But during this time that Edison took a break, this is when Alexander Graham Bell stepped in, and he's known for the invention of the telephone. And him and his team started working on the phonograph themselves to try to improve it. And instead of using tinfoil, they started using wax cylinders. They found this to be a little more successful than using the tinfoil because you could use it, you could play it back more times, whereas tinfoil you couldn't really play it back that much. Bell and his team actually went to Edison to propose their ideas, and Edison refused. Edison, come on man, you don't want to be a team player, do you? And shortly after Edison finished his work on the light bulb and went back to the phonograph, he actually started using wax cylinders, so he kind of took some ideas from the Bell team. Thus, the Edison Phonograph Company was formed on October 8th, 1887. So at this point, a good time has passed since he first created the phonograph. The first wax cylinders were white and made of Saracen, beeswax, and steariac wax. Interesting. There's a lot of different waxes going on. So one little side note I'd like to bring up is this invention. The Edison talking cylinder dolls. They had little miniature phonographs inside of them, and this is what they looked like. And they didn't sound very pleasant. Apparently at their factory they would have women actually yelling into the photographs, and this is what they sound like. Yeah. Yeah. Pretty horrifying, huh? These things are extremely rare. They weren't too popular in the public, so they didn't last too long. So let's fast forward to 1898. There were a lot of ownership issues I'm not really going to go into here, but then Edison finally got the rights back to the company. Prices dropped a lot compared to what they used to be. They used to run around 150 bucks, and in 1891 they roughly sold for 20 bucks. So you can get a phonograph for 20 bucks. And these things were only like 50 cents a pop. And the average runtime was typically 2 minutes per cylinder. One of the biggest problems with these at the time was that there was no means of mass producing them. So performers typically had to perform over and over again for each cylinder made. And this was costly and time consuming. It wasn't until 1901 that a process for mass producing wax cylinders was created. The cylinders were molded rather than engraved, and a harder wax was used. Alright, this process was called gold molded. It was called this because of a gold vapor given off from gold electrodes used in the process for their conductive properties. Hello. So now 120 to 150 cylinders could be made daily. Yeah! Due to the mass production of these, the price dropped to only 35 cents a cylinder. What? Anybody could afford that, right? Not this guy. Fast forward a little bit to around 1912, and Columbia was one of Edison's main competitors, and at this point they abandoned the cylinder market. Edison wasn't quick to abandon them though. He maintained focus and released an even higher quality cylinder to compete with the discs called Blue Amberol. And yes, they were actually higher quality and better sounding, but people just didn't want them. I mean, there were some hardcore fans that stuck with it for a while, but Edison lasted maybe like another year, and in 1913 he started focusing on the more popular disc format. But Edison still produced these up until 1929, when production finally ended. It was done. No more. For a while there, he kept producing them for people that were loyal to the cylinders and had phonographs, and so that's kind of cool that he kept supporting that brand for so long. Alright, so do you have a bonus here or what? How about this guy? Check it out. It's Metalhead, figure that was re-released by NECA. Turtle robot. He's got a drill. So that's it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Like and subscribe if you stuck with it to the end here, and I appreciate everybody checking them out. You know, it's There are these times you gotta do what you gotta do.
Thrifty, thrifty, Tom Thrifty finds. What'll he find next? I don't know. Guess you'll just have to watch the next show. Tom's Thrifty finds. Doo-doo. Yeah.